I wonder how many of you might have ever been to the Gateway Arch in St. Louis. It's a pretty impressive thing if you've ever been there. If you get a chance to go there, it's worth stopping by to see it. I was there several years ago, and actually, I don't know if you know this or not, but you can actually go up in that arch. There's a sort of an elevator. It's not a typical elevator because it takes a curved path, but it'll take you to the top of the arch, and you can look down from up there. So when you're on the ground at the arch, there's typically a fairly large crowd of people gathered around. It is a significant tourist attraction. And of course, it's right on the west bank of the Mississippi River. And so there are all kind of riverboats, big paddle wheel riverboats sitting there at dock just below the Gateway Arch. They're big boats, lots of people. But when you go up in the arch and you get up so high and you look down, it looks totally different. All those people that were there, they just look like little ants crawling around on the ground down there below you. And those great big paddle wheelers, well, they look just like maybe little rafts that somebody might ride on. What's the difference anyway? Well, the difference, of course, is perspective. It's all a matter of perspective, point of view. It has to do with where you're standing when you're taking the view, right? We understand perspective, and we understand how it changes how you look at a thing based upon where you're standing when you look at it. Tonight, we want to have a lesson about perspective. And the perspective that we're particularly interested in is how we are viewed, how people view us. Again, it depends on where you're standing, the view of yourself and how others view. It's all a matter of perspective. And I want to suggest for a few minutes of study tonight that we need to work at seeing ourselves as other people see us. We're going to talk about several different relationships and activities, but I think that this is an appropriate thing to consider. What do other people see when they see me? How am I viewed by them? I want to try to see myself as others see me. That's the idea of the lesson tonight. We stop here just for a minute to say thank you for being here on this Sunday evening. We're glad to end the day with another chance to come together in Bible study and worship. And we're glad that so many of you have an interest in these things that brings you back on Sunday evening. Thanks for being here. For those who are visiting with us, thank you to you especially for being here. And we hope you'll come again every time you have a chance to be here. Well, let's talk about some relationship things first of all. Seeing ourselves as others see us. I think, for instance, husbands and wives would do well to put themselves in each other's shoes. I think all of our marriages could probably benefit and be improved if we made an effort to look at life from the other one's point of view, get their perspective on things. So, for instance, in 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 7, husbands, live with your wives in an understanding way. Well, I think very much there Peter is saying, husbands, try to see things from your wife's perspective. That seems clearly to be the idea that he's saying. But then to the wives, Paul says in Titus 2, verse 15, wives, be submissive to their own husbands. I think these two things, understanding and submissiveness, involve looking at things from the other person's point of view. And so the question is, and this is the whole idea of the short lesson we want to present tonight, are you doing that? Husbands, are you trying to understand the unique challenges that your wife faces on a day-to-day basis? Do you make any effort at all to comprehend how she feels about things and what she thinks about things? Have you made any effort to try to see things from her point of view? And then on the other hand, wives, do you sense the pretty large responsibilities that your husband must shoulder? And do you, by looking at things from his perspective, do you make it easier or harder for him to be an effective spiritual head of the family? And so if husbands understood a little bit more about how wives think, and wives understood a little bit more about the role that the husband has to fulfill, things would be better if we looked at it from the other point of view. So that's just an example of the kind of thing we're talking about. We could expand that further within the family relationship. We could talk about parents and children. In Ephesians chapter 6, verse 4, it says, "Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord." Bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. Children, and of course, obviously here I'm talking to older children because the very young ones are not at a state to be perceptive of such things. But those of you young people who are older, do you realize that your parents have one of the toughest job assignments on earth? I really think that's a fair way of describing the awesome responsibility of parenting. And you children should take a minute to stop and think and appreciate the really tough job that your parents have to do. Yeah, I've made this point lots of times recently, and I think it's true that parents today are facing increasing challenges, and that their job is harder today than maybe it has been ever before because of the various things that the sinful world can present to the family. And so young people, appreciate your parents. Look at it from their point of view. Realize that they have a really tough job on their hands. You should spend some time appreciating what your parents do. But then on the other hand, parents, do you think about your children? In that same chapter of Ephesians chapter 6 at verse 1, "Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right." Well, children have a responsibility in the family relationship too, and they have an obligation to be obedient. But I got to tell you, sometimes parents can make it pretty hard. They can place so many tough hurdles before their children that they make it hard to be compliant. It's hard for them to obey. And so maybe parents need to spend a little time thinking about it from the child's point of view. I have known, maybe you have known situations where parents were so hard and harsh toward their children that they made it hard to be obedient, and even placed a temptation toward rebellion in front of their children because they weren't seeing things from the child's point of view whatsoever. And so again, I think you see the idea that we're suggesting here. Try to see it from the other person's point of view. These two things obviously are discussing the family. And I really do think that there's a great advantage to be gained in our families, husbands, wives, parents, and children, from seeing things from each other's point of view, perspective, if you will, seeing as others see us. Okay, here I want to really shift gears. I hope I've established the idea that we're pursuing here, but I really want to switch gears here. And I'm missing a page here. I guess I'm going to have to wing it there because one of my pages is missing. No, wait a minute. Here it is. I got it. The next thing that I want to talk about is a whole different thing. I want to talk about elders and churches. So we're really changing gears here, but elders and the churches they oversee need to engage in this activity of perspective, looking at it from the other person's point of view. A preacher I know said, "Some churches do not deserve good elders, and some elders do not deserve good churches." So it could go either way. And I think that's probably an accurate observation. We know that elders are addressed, and the duties they have are addressed in verses like 1 Peter chapter 5, beginning verse 1. Peter says, "Therefore I exhort the elders, shepherd the flock of God among you, exercising oversight, not under compulsion, but voluntarily, nor yet as lording it over those allotted to your charge, but proving to be examples to the flock." I think this is a really important expression here concerning the role and work of elders, not lording it over those allotted to your charge. I think we could say real plainly and clearly that elders who are guilty of lording it over cannot expect to earn the trust and respect and love of the flock. And so elders need to realize that's not the way to do their work, lording it over the flock. Put yourself in the position of those that you're leading. Understand that they would not follow, they would not appreciate elders who lord it over the flock. So elders need to think about it. Elders who are overseeing the flock need to look at it from the flock's point of view. How is this leadership style working for you anyway? That needs to be a consideration. But then, of course, on the other hand, those who are members of the church need to realize a statement like Hebrews 13, verse 17. Obey your leaders, submit to them, for they keep watch for your souls as those who will give account. I really think that church members need to appreciate the huge responsibility that elders have in the work that they've been assigned to do. I'm particularly sort of challenged by this expression. Elders will give an account. They watch over your souls as those who will give an account. As you all here at College U know, we just recently began a new relationship as elders and the flock. Monty and Gordon and I are particularly overwhelmed, I think, by trying to get up to speed and get to work in the job of being elders. This expression right here causes me to lose sleep at night. Who will give an account? Elders will give an account. I told someone recently, it used to be all I had to do was preach to the church. Now, as an elder, along with Gordon and Monty, I'm accountable for everyone in the church in this sense that is described here in Hebrews chapter 13, verse 7. That's a real responsibility. That's a scary job, in my opinion. It will help Gordon and Monty and I if you look at it from that perspective. Make our jobs as easy as it can be, understanding that we're accountable in this situation. So we as elders need to see it from your perspective. It will be very helpful if you as members will see it from our perspective. The whole thing will work a lot more smoothly if we do that. Elders in churches need to see themselves as others see them. Get the point? Here's one that you might not have thought about much, but what about the men who lead in the worship and the rest who are participating in the worship? I really think this is an important way to express it. When we come together in these assemblies, this is not a spectator sport. Everybody's here supposed to be participating in what we do. Well, what about that then? What about the men who lead in the worship and those who participate in the worship? Well, let me speak first to those who lead in the worship. In 1 Corinthians chapter 14, verse 12, Paul says, seek to abound to the edification of the church. In other words, make it your goal. Strive to do what you're doing in a way that will lead to the edification or the building up, the encouraging of the church. We remember in verse 40 of that same chapter, he says, all things must be done properly and in an orderly manner. I think the King James Version there says decently and in order. It seems that we really emphasize this last part a lot. Things must be done decently and in order, and that certainly is important. But I want to tell you, this part cannot be overlooked. Everything that we do when we come together in the assembly needs to be for the edification or the building up of the church. And so for all men who lead in the public worship, understand that you need to be doing your job in such a way, do your work and do it well, so that the church is edified, encouraged, built up. I want to tell you, when we as men get up before the congregation and we bumble and fumble and make all kinds of mistakes, attention is drawn away from the God that we are here to worship, and focus sort of unavoidably lands upon the mistakes of the one who is doing the leading. Years ago, there was a preacher, some of you no doubt remember the name Robert Turner. He put out a bulletin that was mailed all over the country. His bulletin title was Plain Talk. for years when I was just beginning to preach. I got Robert Turner's Plain Talk Bulletin and always enjoyed it. In it, he told a story, and he was basically making this same point. If you're going to lead in the public worship, be prepared, do your job as good as you can. Brother Turner talked about one old brother who would get up to make announcements. And he said it went sort of like this. He said, now, everybody remember, we're going to have a gospel meeting. Brother Turner, what are the dates of that gospel meeting? Oh, okay, yes, he says. And then he said, we need to be remembering Sister so-and-so. And Brother Turner, what hospital is she in, by the way? You know. So everything he got ready to announce, he had to stop and ask for clarification. And Brother Turner's sort of humorous conclusion from that was, he said, anybody can preach, but it takes a really good man to make announcements. And I think that's probably a pretty fair observation. But in announcements, in song leading, especially at the Lord's table, we need to do the best job that we can do. Preparation is important. We publish a duty roster well ahead of time. You should know, you should check, you should see ahead of time if you're going to be called upon to lead an important part of the worship on a given time. Knowing that you're going to be called upon, make appropriate preparations in order to be ready. Instead of just flying in here at the last minute and operating off the cuff, look ahead, be prepared. Could I say this as well? You know, not everybody shares the same abilities. For instance, not everybody needs to be a song leader. Not everybody has that ability to do so. And we just have to understand that, because we want our worship and the conducting of our worship by its leaders to be as effective as possible. So, those of you who take part in leading the worship, how do people see it? When they see you stepping up to take part, are they encouraged to think, this will be helpful, this will be good, I'm looking forward? Or on the other hand, do they sort of cringe and think, oh no, he's going to take that part today, he never does well? Which is it? Because as leaders, we need to understand how others would view our work in conducting the worship service. Will we be doing everything in a fashion that will edify the church? Think about that, you who will take part in leading the public worship. But it's not just the leaders who need to engage in this perspective business. Everybody else needs to understand the challenges of leading, and they need to be doing what they can to encourage those who take a public part in the worship. Hebrews 3 verse 13 says, encourage one another. You know, that's a general expression, but I think is particularly appropriate toward those who lead in the public worship. They need your encouragement. They need your support, and they need your cooperation, and they need your encouragement. When was the last time that you said to someone who had a part in the public worship, when was the last time you said, good job, man, I really appreciated it. That was a big encouragement to me. Thank you for what you did today. Have you done that lately? You know, we tend to overlook that, don't we? But if we're looking at it, that guy who got up to lead singing, that guy who presided at the Lord's table and had obviously spent some time preparing his thoughts ahead of time, it would be a big boost to him if someone said, that really good job. I really appreciated what you said or what you did today. We need to encourage one another. Several years ago, and I'm not fishing for any compliments about the preaching here when I say all that I'm saying here, but several years ago, just to give you an example of how bad some Christians are in this business of encouraging one another. Several years ago, there was a particular member of the church here, he's not here anymore, but there was a particular member of the church here who, to my knowledge, I don't think had ever commented on a lesson, good or bad, and that's fine because that's not necessary. I don't think he'd ever commented on a lesson before. On a Sunday evening, he went past me and said, you actually said something good this morning, but I can't remember what it was.
not too encouraging, not too helpful there, So, can preachers, along with everybody else who takes part in the public worship, can we do a better job? Obviously, we need to do the best that we can. But let's look at it. Let's look at this from how others see it. Let's look at the perspective of others. So, again, just some thoughts to encourage us all to do the best we can when we come together in our assemblies. How about this category? Teachers and students. First of all, let's talk to the teachers. Teachers, you have a high responsibility category for your job. In James chapter 3, verse 1, James says, "We who teach will be judged with greater strictness." And so the idea here is that you are responsible and you're accountable for the teaching that you do. Again, I think you have a responsibility as teachers to your students to be prepared to do the very best that you can. Again, you have assumed a degree of accountability. And so you are going to be judged with greater strictness. Know that. Be aware of the responsibility. Don't just take this particular teaching assignment and then, again, not invest yourself in preparation and work and doing the best job you can. Don't do that. There's an accountability that attaches to that. Part of that preparedness is to be a good student yourself. It has been said, I think it's a fair observation, good teachers start out first of all being good students. You have to be a good student if you're going to be a good teacher. So teachers, understand, do your job well. You have a great responsibility. But we could speak to the students too. In 2 Timothy 2 verse 15 it says, "Be diligent to present yourself approved unto God, accurately handling the word of truth." The King James Version there, where newer translations say be diligent, the King James Version actually says study to show thyself approved unto God, a workman that needs not be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of God. But so this diligence is I think a general. Give diligence in all things, but it actually specifies in the verse how we handle the word of truth. So this diligence or this study includes your preparation from the Word of God. Students appreciate, I hope you students will appreciate, the hard work that your teachers do in trying to make the classes they teach just as interesting and helpful and beneficial as they possibly can be. You students then need to be prepared when you come to Bible class. I got to say, sadly, I have known this to be an historic problem, not just here at College View, but in other places. I've heard teachers who complain that their students don't prepare. They don't bring their Bibles to class. They don't bring their Bible class literature to class. Their lessons are not filled out. They are not ready. They are not prepared. Some of them hardly even know what the topic is that is being studied. I think that's bad. That's very bad. And all students need to do better than that. You know, I'm always somewhat disappointed when after Sunday or after Wednesday night, you come into the auditorium when there's no one here and you find class books, Bible class literature, special study sheets and pages that the teachers have prepared, just thrown aside, left behind. That's not good. It's honestly not good. Teachers are working hard to do the best they can. Students need to work hard to take advantage of what's being provided for them the best that they can. And so, again, we can help each other. It has also been said that good students make a good teacher even better, and I think that's true also. So we can help each other in regards to teachers and students. Okay, so I think this notion can be expanded to almost all relationships and activities that we might engage in as members of the Lord's body. And again, I think it's really important. Could we say it's like a two-way street? In every one of these things that we've discussed, there's one side and the other. And when both sides see things appropriately, it really, really helps. I want to add one more category here, and that is each one of us and God, seeing ourselves as others see us. Now, in all of these things that we discussed already, there's two ways to see things. How I see it, how the other person sees it, how he sees me, how I see myself, all of that. This one is different. Because in this category, God is not dependent upon us or how we view Him. It doesn't matter what we think of God. That's not at stake at all. That's not an issue. But it is very important how God sees us. And we need to see ourselves as God sees us. Now, thankfully, that's possible. We can know how God sees us. In the text that Stephen read for us just at the start of services this evening, in James chapter 1, beginning verse 22, "Be ye doers of the word, not hearers only, deceiving your own selves. For if anyone is a hearer of the word, not a doer, he's like a man who looks intently at his natural face in the mirror. For he looks at himself and goes away and at once forgets what he was like. But the one who looks into the perfect law, the law of liberty, and perseveres, being no hearer who forgets, but a doer who acts, he will be blessed in his deed, in his doing." I think this is kind of an interesting picture that James paints here. He suggests somebody who goes and looks at his face in a mirror. So you go and you look in the mirror, and maybe your hair is all just a fright, and you got a big smudge of dirt on the side of your face. And you look at that, and you see that, and then you just turn away and go on, without making the corrections that were dictated by what you saw in the mirror. You saw some things in the mirror that needed to be changed, but you didn't change them. He said that doesn't even make sense. That's just totally ridiculous and illogical that you would see in the mirror how you need to correct yourself and you don't do it. He says effectively that's what's going on when you look into the Word of God and you see things that need to be different in your life and you don't change them. He said that's even more ridiculous. So you should not be a hearer who forgets, but a doer who acts. That's what we need to do. But thankfully, we have the capacity to see ourselves as God sees us because He has given us His revealed Word. We know how God views us. Now the challenge is to make needed corrections and align ourselves in such a fashion to be acceptable in His sight. Seeing ourselves as others see us. I think it's an important notion. I think this business of perspective is a valuable one to consider, and hopefully you can take that notion and apply it in lots of different relationships and realms of activity. Thanks for listening so well to the lesson tonight. We appreciate you so much. We're going to sing a song of invitation. As we sing this song, we'll be asking everybody present, make sure your life is right with God. If it's not, if it needs to change, we're available to help you in that. If you need to obey the gospel, do that. If you need the prayers of the saints as an erring child of God, ask for that. If we can help in any way, let us know while we stand and sing.